Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to talk about how romantic love changes people. And if you don't think that, then maybe there's some issues with you or with the relationship. And we will get to that as soon as I tell you to subscribe. Most recent subscriber episode was on money addiction. And if you buy a lot of stuff, and you buy more than you want to, or you tell yourself that you are buying what you have to, but somewhere on the periphery of your mind, you know that you are doing this for a dopamine rush, then that is the episode for you. Okay, so today we're going to talk about this idea that romantic love changes people. I read an essay about that. Unfortunately, I don't remember where. I read so much stuff, and I should cite all of it, but I don't, because I don't know where the hell this was from. But it was a nice idea, and it's true. Obviously, if you are in a love relationship, especially for the first time, and most people are in their first marriage, and so that's its own kind of first romantic love, because it may not be the first boyfriend or girlfriend you ever had, but it's the first marriage you're in. That certainly should change you to be that close to another person. And of course, your second marriage is going to change you and whatever else as well. So really, any relationship that you are deeply committed to the person should change you. I have a podcast that says if you don't change your partner's mind on anything during dating, that's a red flag. Because romantic love is, and by the way, when you have a baby, that's romantic love too. You fall in love with a baby. That's why women are obsessed with the baby. And a lot of men are obsessed with their baby because it triggers that same kind of deep love, and it's an idealized romantic feeling love on a deep level. But anyway, we're talking about straight up just marriage, romantic love here. And it cracks you open. It makes you feel more vulnerable. You are open to new ideas. Your dopamine is flowing. Your adrenaline is flowing. Your inhibitions are down. The honeymoon stage, people try so many things that they never tried before, and some of those stick. There is a window for change, and it is in the early stages of romantic love, but you can also change in later stages of romantic love too, obviously. So there's plenty of men, for example, that drink all throughout, the early marriage, and then the woman gives an ultimatum and she says, I don't want you to drink anymore, and they stop. And they are changing for romantic love. There's people who are addicted to lots of things. There's people who never treated their depression or their anxiety until a partner puts their foot down about it. But even in ways that are not so obvious as a partner literally telling you to change and then you pursuing change in those ways, there's little changes that should happen all along. You like your food more spicy because your partner cooks more spicy food, or you listen to different kind of music because your partner introduces it to you. Your politics change. That's a really big one for a lot of people, is that their politics they moderate because it's somewhere between what they think and what their partner thinks, and both of them come to more of an in-between center. The reality is these people that say they're getting divorced over politics aren't. They're getting divorced over being closed-minded, because neither one of them can see the larger perspective and that there's good points made on both sides politically, and each one of them is in a delusion that they're, viewpoint is above reproach. And so people who actually will end a long relationship, and it's not a lot of people, but it's been more in recent years than ever before, at least couples therapists perceive that in their offices, people that will end a relationship over politics. I have multiple posts and podcasts about politics as a proxy variable, and people who cannot come to terms with compromise are the ones who will get divorced in those ways. The majority of couples will take some of their philosophy, some of the other person's philosophy, and both of them will kind of get to a new philosophy, and that's totally healthy. What happens if you're like, what are you talking about? I am what I am. I have a podcast, by the way, with the title, I Am What I Am. And nobody's ever changed me. Why would a romantic partner change what I think? Well, congratulations, you're an avoidant. That's just what it is. Like, if you cannot be changed by romantic love, then, what kind of love is it that you would never even take that person's perspective into account in a real enough way for it to change your own perspective? That doesn't sound much like love. That sounds like you like someone, but it doesn't sound like you're really close and open and, you're kind of creating a new self when you're in romantic love. It helps you become something new. So just like having a baby, you become a mother. You become the mother of the baby. Well, when you have romantic love, you become the partner of that person. You're not just you anymore. You're the partner of whoever that person is. And that obviously has to be different. You wouldn't parent every baby the same. You wouldn't be the same mother to a shy child as you would to an outgoing child. You would be different. You would access different parts of your capacity as a parent so that you could provide a good parenting experience that fit with each of those hypothetical children. And it's the same when you have romantic partners. There's a million, zillion, infinity different people you could be with a million, zillion, infinity romantic partners. You would access different parts of yourself. And if you think that's bullshit and you just would be what you would be, it is likely that your partner perceives you to be avoidant or, detached from them, that you do prioritize the way that you think about yourself and this idea that you're unchangeable. That's the priority versus allowing your partner to have an impact on you. And as I mentioned many times, Gottman has researched and shown that the most important thing is accepting influence. That has the biggest bang for the buck in creating a happy marriage, especially from men, from the male side. So a man accepting influence from his wife, that's going to lead to a happy marriage. And from women, it's a gentle approach. But I would imagine that both of those variables are to some extent true for both genders anyway. And so if you cannot accept influence, then are you really changed by that person? Did you become their partner? Or are you just kind of hanging out with them while you're doing your own thing? And if it's the latter, then they may feel quite lonely. They may feel very, very separate from you. Now, there's also the possibility that you haven't had many love relationships, and the one that, your major one is the marriage, and it isn't a good fit, and it hasn't really changed you in any way positively because you are not really in love with the person and you don't really respect them. You don't really think that they're that smart. You don't really think that anything they say has much merit. And by the way, this is unfortunately not uncommon for people to, if they were adult children of dysfunctional families, they were in this dynamic where one parent was smarter than the other, one was considered kind of useless, one was considered almost a joke, then they frequently get into the same kind of dynamic and they marry somebody that they look down on because then they could have power and control over that person. And of course, if you look down on somebody, why would they impact your thoughts or perspectives or opinions? That wouldn't make any sense. If you don't respect them, right, then why in the world would you care to look inward and change any of your long-held beliefs because they believe it? You look down on them, so you wouldn't. So can you really love deeply somebody that you don't respect? I don't think so. So if you do not respect your partner, then you probably have not changed much of who you are to be with them. And you have not taken any of their hobbies or opinions or preferences or thoughts or philosophies into account when shaping your own because you're not really truly in love with them. And that could be a tough nut to crack there. And unfortunately, as I've said many times, couples therapy does not create love where there is none, and it can help you access empathy and understand why you married somebody like this, but it doesn't usually then open you up to a deeper love with them, unless it truly is this super defense mechanism where you're pretending to look down on them, but you really are very scared that they'll leave you, which is, of course, what all preoccupied attachment women are hoping, is that their avoidant attached husband, is just pretending, to be cold. And men are, to a different degree, sexually like, oh, my avoidant wife, she really does like what we do in bed. She just literally never, ever asks to have sex ever and acts like she doesn't like it, but somehow she still likes it. Usually that's not true. Usually people are not pretending not to be close to you. They just don't feel close. They just don't have the capacity to feel close to within a romantic relationship. They have to do their own work, or they have to decide that deep romantic relationships are not for them, or whatever else. But the point is that if you have not ever changed, or let's talk about your partner in that case, if you have an avoidant partner that has never changed how they think about anything, how they feel, even sex is a great example. So there's guys that say, like, I've been trying everything in bed, over the course of our marriage and nothing seems to work. Well, that's because she, it could be multiple things. She could just not be that into you. She could just not be that into sex. And also she could be super avoidant and tied to this idea that you're not going to make her like anything against her will. And that's in bed or out of bed. And there's men like that too. There's women who say, why don't we slow down? Why don't we do foreplay? Why don't you ever go down on me? Things like that. And avoidant men, by the way, are the ones who don't go down on women and don't like to explore in bed and just really do like to have intercourse and get off. And so the guy doesn't want to, because he's like, who are you to change what I do in bed? There was some comment that I had on Substack so long ago, maybe maybe a year ago by now. And it was, the guy said, like, I just don't understand, like, how it works. I don't understand how getting a woman off is an expression of my desire. He said, you say that women want to be desired, but also that they want good sexual technique. So how could it be like, I'm so into you that I just want to rub your clit? Like, that was the comment. And I was like, yes, that is what it's like. And that person, that commenter, obviously is not the sort of person who would be open and changeable by a relationship. Like, they think that expressing desire is having an erection and having sex. And why would you learn how to please the other person? Like, why would you change how you feel? He expresses desire with an erection. So that's what that is. And why would anything else, to the person who will not be changed by a relationship, anything else feels fake to them. They're really tied to the idea that they are what they are and they'll only be one thing, and there should not be responsive desire. There should not be change and growth. Everything should just be two people every day, like Groundhog Day, waking up, looking at each other like they just met, having intercourse, and going about their days separately. That's like the avoidant, dream. And if it's an avoidant woman, without the intercourse part, just literally waking up, preferably in separate cities, and going about your day, right? And the point is that if you are avoidant, then the idea of being changed by a relationship is just horrifying. You don't want to be changed by anything. Never mind another person, because if they change you, then possibly they have some kind of power over you, is the fear. And you don't want to have anybody in charge of you, have any power over you. You want to be solo in charge of yourself. And avoidant people really disavow the role of their parenting and their own upbringing. Although they know that their parenting matters, which is, of course, makes no sense. They'll say, oh, yeah, I know that I need to be like, an involved dad or involved mom. But like, my own upbringing didn't matter to me at all because, I was very independent from a young age. And how does that make any sense? It's inconsistent. But that's individual therapy. If you're an avoidant and you're getting older and you're like, maybe this attachment thing is real. Maybe my strange upbringing and lack of relying on other people is a thing that matters, then get into individual therapy and work through it, because many, many people feel very good and very happy about using their midlife years to kind of reflect, and older years too, to reflect on who they are, where they came from, and the whole narrative and arc of their life. But, if you don't want to, don't. but a lot of people benefit a great deal from doing that. And it's psychologically you come full circle. It feels very healing, and it feels very, what's the word? Feels like you're finally out of Plato's cave, as I say all the time, and you have this objectivity and this clarity about why you may have trouble relying on others. And that stuff is hard won, these insights into yourself. You are your only self, so you probably ought to explore yourself. And non-avoidants know that, and avoidants are like, why the hell would I want somebody, digging inside my brain? Well, because it could really help you understand yourself, truly. But point being, and then you would engage better with the kids, with your spouse if you care, with even at work. People really do not respond as well to avoidant, closed off people who always have to be right. They just don't. But anyway, point being, if you are the sort of person that feels that you do want to be changed by a romantic relationship and you understand how growing together would be great and, something that you would yearn to do, but it just is not possible in your current marriage, then you probably should be thinking about your current marriage and how it is working for you. And also, you could be trying in the wrong ways. There could be ways that you could grow closer to your spouse and you just don't look for them. So you don't see them. So maybe you could do the same hobby as your spouse, and that would be a whole area where you could bond, even if you've looked down on their hobby. If you look down on your spouse, basically get into therapy is my point. but still, the therapist will then help you understand why you are and in what ways you could stop doing it, or if the marriage is even working out overall. But hopefully this has given you a window into how romantic love changes people and who, parentheses, avoidance, struggle with this. And I hope you enjoyed it. And thanks for listening, guys. And I'll talk to everybody soon.